Welcome. This is Mbti Magic, the one and only place to go for the advanced and basic principles of MBTI. And I'm basically here to help everybody understand the power of MBTI, how to utilize the tools of MBTI, and to understand the different functions of MBTI. I feel like most people, basically, if you know anything about MBTI, you mainly know your type. Maybe at best, you know a few other people's types, maybe a few of the other types. If you're really good, you know all the types. That takes a lot of skill to get to that level. And as you grow throughout the levels of MBTI, you'll eventually begin to get even deeper into where you understand how the functions work together. Like, why is a ENFP a ENFP? Why is a ISTJ or a ENTP a ENTP or ISTJ? And it really has to do with specific functions that they have, and how they work together. So it's basically figuring out the puzzle. And just so I can give you a little bit of imagery, somebody last week on the ENFP page was like, "Is that a butt?" You're hilarious for asking that. Shout out to you. It's not a butt. This is actually my drawing of a brain. It looks like two potatoes, but just be a little bit imaginative. Maybe I'll give it like neurons or something. Let me give it some neurons so they connect. I've never drawn a brain before. Here we go. I did last week, though. That was episode 1 of this. So for people who are asking me about last week's episode, unfortunately, we had trouble keeping it to, what do you call it? It ended up going into the wrong drive. So it's my only lost episode. So unfortunately, I don't have that. It's okay because this episode is going to be even better. And I'll do another one later on talking about TE, which is extroverted thinking, TI, FE, FI, basically thinking versus feeling. But today, this is it. It's sensing, and you write that at the top. Sensing versus intuition. And I don't want to just say versus because that means they're opposing each other, which they actually are. But since they are naturally opposing each other, I want to talk about how to make them work together so that you can have the full complexity and inner workings and interlockings of your mind. Because when you know how to work your sensing and intuition together, man, you begin to have a very balanced experience, okay? But you first have to understand that as sensors and as intuitives, we live in a very different world while living in a very similar world. We're living in the same world, but it's very different. So first and foremost, I want to talk about sensing in general versus intuition in general. So essentially, I've done videos on this. So if you ever want to look at videos where I talk about each type, go to my YouTube. It's called God Johnny Speaks. It's GODJANI Speaks, SPEAKS on YouTube. I have a bunch of MBTI videos on there. Check that out. So basically, to understand the difference between sensing and intuition, what's the difference between these two, right? Essentially, sensing is your ability to view and utilize the 5 senses. It's more so focused on experience. It's an experiential function. It's a function that bases everything that it knows essentially on what it's seen, what it's tasted, what it's touched, what it's heard. Okay, so if you listen to people have introverted sensing a lot of the time, you can pull back and remember all of these memories and give you all of these examples of this time and that time. But essentially what's going on is they have a very good connection to what they've touched, what they've seen, and they use that as the metric for them to judge what to do next or what to value, okay? And when we look at it, the world is mainly comprised of sensor-dominant people. And when you really think of sensory, just think of the 5 senses. Just think of it's experiencing. It's physically what you can touch, what you can feel. It's the things that are tangible that you can hold. You know what I mean? So if you were a sensor dominant versus intuitive, something like a heart like this is something that being able to hold this heart, like let's say your mother gave it to you or something, that's really big for introverted senses, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But the ability to hold or hang on to things, they want to have possessions, they want to have valuables that allow them to remember or to hold on to things. Whereas if you're an intuitive, okay, this is where the difference is, that experience is much more mental, okay? it is much more, you would hold that image in your mind and you can see it very vividly in your mind. That's the experience of intuition. Why is that? Because while the sensory person or the sensory dominant person is going through life and really relating to it on a sensory level and carrying things with them that are more physical so that they remember what's going on, or so that they remember the values, right? They're held in physical objects more. The intuitive carries that same image. Let's say there's two guys. One is a sensor, one's an intuitive. The sensor, it might want to have, physical things that remind them of being brave. Okay. Two guys going out into the world, they want to be brave. The sensor will, maybe look at his watch, look at his tattoos. This is just an example. Look at his arm. Like, you know what? I'm tough. Like, I know I'm tough because I've seen people. They might think about experiences where they've actually fought, or they might think of experiences where they might look at somebody and be like, I think I'm tougher than him. It's more gauged on what I'm seeing. Like, what am I seeing right now? What have I seen to gauge what I am? Intuitives, on the other hand, okay, they utilize the same mechanisms because if you have intuition, you have sensing. I mean, they work together. They're a pairing function. But the intuitive will hang on to ideas more, will be more ideological. So I know I'm tough because as long as I believe in myself. See, this is a mantra, like this is a quote that's giving them power. Or they might say, I know I'm tough because I believe it in my mind, or I can see myself being tough. I can imagine, like if you ever did an exercise and say, imagine yourself being like 6'8", completely swole, like completely strong, and imagine you had an aura and a frequency around you that was so powerful it could push people away from you. Now, this language that I'm speaking is more mental. It's more intuitive language. Okay. So when you understand the difference, they both are drawing power from life, but one has an idea of power and they have a symbol in their mind that they're charging from. The other actually is holding a physical object. Okay. Something like this heart right here. I put it in the right, it was in the wrong spot. Boom. Now, let's talk about how they work together. That's what this is really about. So, as I explained, sensing is touching, experiencing. Sensing is a function where it is taking life in as it comes. It's a much more present function because you have to understand when you're utilizing intuition, you're basically outside of time. Like you're outside of where you are. Okay. For example, we can be at a beach, me and you at a beach, hanging out at a beach, water, thank you, water, food, barbecue at a beach. Let's just make up a barbecue at a beach. You obviously know I'm intuitive because I'm making stuff up in my head. Barbecue at a beach and people are there. And so imagine that there is a sensor there, right? The sensors are there eating food, talking about what's going on there, enjoying the water, maybe playing with the dogs that are out there at the beach with them. They're doing all of these things presently. They're relating to what's in their environment. They're much more focused on, okay, I'm here. Let me milk the most out of this experience because the food's going to taste good to the senses. Seeing people, my eyes are going to be able to see people at the beach that I haven't seen before. So now their awareness can be on new people. They can wear clothes that are bright and colorful. Like I get to finally wear this outfit and see how they respond to me on a sensory level. So they're in the environment because that's where their bodies are, so that they can only taste, touch, feel what's there with them at the beach. Now the intuitives, right? So while all the senses are hanging out at the beach, laughing, running around, now the intuitives are the ones that might be in a group in the corner or in a group talking, right? And while they're talking and engaging in their intuition, a bunch of ideas, what's happening is they're not really at the beach at that moment. The minute an intuitive goes, yeah, actually at work, blah, blah, blah. How's blah, blah, blah? Oh, yeah, I see. While we're talking and having this entire conversation about ideas, and especially when you get intuitives around other intuitives, it's just like the idea vortex going on. They're just going from one idea to the next idea, right? Once that starts going on, we're not really at the beach. Our bodies are at the beach, but our intuition is in a completely different space, okay? So one thing that I want to create a distinction with when we talk about sensing and intuition is Sensing is more related to time and space. Okay, it's meant for present time. Sensing is about what I've seen in present time, and sensing is about where I am at present time. Okay, and it's about getting the most out of the present moment. And it's like taking the present moment, one moment in time, and putting all of your awareness and attention into the moment. And imagine how much you see versus an intuitive in the present moment as a sensor. Imagine how while intuitives are talking, the sensor might be noticing the waves on the beach. They might be noticing different shoes that people are wearing, different outfits people are wearing. They might be noticing how these two people are getting along. They might have somebody that they are interested in, like a love attraction or something, and they might want to start a conversation with that person. So because of that, naturally, as a dominant sensor, right, you have a natural ability to get the most out of the experience of the moment. So even imagine that's why most sensors, a lot of the time, especially extroverted sensors, okay, they are very good at sports, at extreme type of sports, any kind of sports. Sense is very good at building, developing things in real time. Okay, sensing is very good at doing things like surfing. Like if you're at a beach, the sensors will be the ones that want to go out there and surf. They want to go out there and try things. They want to jump off a they want to jump off a cliff and try to get it, like, jump off a cliff into a big, ocean or something. This is the sensory thrill because their whole thing is they don't have the wherewithal necessarily or the headspace to go into their mind so much. So in order to push their experiences forward, in order to expand their reality, they want to experience things. That's how they build their data bank of reality. It starts with, okay, I started off as a 5-year-old with extroverted sensing, and by pushing the limits of life and by pushing things and trying things physically, now I know not to do that. Now I know to do this. So it's much more of they begin to build a reality based on things they've seen, touched, tasted, felt. Okay. So it's a very practical function. Sensing, honestly, is the function that is the most primal in the sense of when you think of animals, okay? And this isn't in a bad way. You have to think of it like a hawk. If you look at the abilities that animals in the jungle have or animals in nature in general, like outside of the jungle, because there's animals everywhere, you'll notice that like certain animals like a hawk can just laser beam or like totally lock into their prey, okay? If you think of the predator, if you think of a lion, the skills of a cheetah to run so fast, things like these are animals that are more engaged into their senses. They're not having a whole intuitive conversation as animals. It's about survival. And because of that, sensing is one of our original functions. I believe personally that our original functions were sensing and feeling. You know what I mean? And sensing and feeling were how we gauge everything. And then we eventually evolved to balance things out and have our dual functions. So through sensing, we developed intuition. We couldn't have intuition without first experiencing things first. All intuition does is essentially take the experiences and then hold them in the mind so that when it comes back around, it's not like a brand new thing again. You can now begin to build metrics in your mind to deal with what is coming to you in the sensory world. So when we talk about sensing, it's an original primal function. And if you have extroverted sensing or introverted sensing, you have the ability to lock into those primal functions. You have the ability to push the body and to test the limits of physicality on another level. A lot of sensors also are very good at like weightlifting, bodybuilding. And then if you're not on the more productivity side of sensing, it can reverse and you can be the kind of sensor that likes to eat everything all the time and get really big, like in the sense of super engaging in things and overindulging. So there's positive and negative sides to every function. So sensing has both of those characteristics. Because it is such a primal function, if it's very disciplined, it can be very sharp and precise and very and have very valuable information within it that it's holding as a sensor, because what you're dealing with and what you're doing has been predicated on real life experiences, not hokey pokey stuff, not big miracle airy things, woo woo things. That's not sensing language. Sensing language is like, let's talk about the practical. Let's talk about what's here right now. And if we are going to talk about things, that are out of the now. You have the introverted sensing, which is, we'll just talk about the past. So think of sensing as present and past. That's all sensing is. There is no future yet. That's when you step into intuition. Sensors are focused on the present, or they'll look to the past as a metric. And whatever they're looking at in the past is based on what I've seen in the past. Okay, what's been present in the past. So that's what sensing is about. And that explains why sensors, that's more of the quote unquote practical function. It's more of the realistic function. Sensing is the function that has to do with real life events. So when you try to prove someone wrong, or when you try to battle a sensor, they're going to bring to you facts, and you're going to have to be very convincing as an intuitive in order to win that battle. Okay, so that's kind of the world of sensing on a general level. But let's give it its comparison now. So we said sensing. Sensing is essentially present and past. So now, how do we tap into the future? Well, when we start talking about tapping into the future, we're talking about intuition. Intuition. And intuition essentially is almost like a simulation. It's a simulation of all of the experiences that we've seen, all of the symbols we've seen, all of the sensory things we've come across, the things we've touched, tasted, but then it goes a little bit further than sensing. Intuition begins to take into account different symbols put together, or different configurations put together, or what if we took, like, sensing is like, okay, I've seen a bird fly before. Intuition is like, what if what if we design something that can fly? So that's not something we've seen, but intuition has seen it. So see, intuition, right? The funny thing about intuition is it's essentially taking the whole spectrum of things we've seen, and then it begins to put it into its own world. And what I mean by that is intuition begins to make connections, whether they're linear connections, like logical connections, or illogical connections, right? Or like patterns, things that aren't like just sharp lines, like curvatures. And what if, like, the beauty of intuition is, like, intuition is used when you think of creation. So, like, let's say we wanted to come up with a store, and a sensor might be like, I know how to make really good pizza. That's what I'm good at. I know that I've seen that I've made good pizza my whole life. The intuitive is going to say, let's make a pizza store, or let's make a pizza shop. So now you're connecting pizza in this person's experiences with a business, with something external, and connecting the two, which creates a whole new reality for that person who's a sensor. Because now we're stepping into a new space. Okay, intuition is bringing connections together and seeing how these things can become one thing. So we take a guy that's really good at making pizzas. His name could be Lito. Our guy Lito is amazing at making pizzas. What if we connect him with a business, which then connect to everyone so that everyone can try this pizza? Now you're dealing with intuition. Okay, now we're beginning to make connections, okay, in order to open up the spectrum for the sensor. So that's what intuition is for us. And if we go back into the days of, like, the jungle and in the tribal days, there's some theories that you can imagine for how intuition was developed. Intuition was a purely survival function that came from sensing. We noticed what was here. We noticed what happened in the past. So then we had to say, if we want to change the present moment, if we want to begin to survive better, how about we come up with plans and create ideas and mechanisms so that we can protect ourselves with all of the threats that are coming at us. Okay. So now, before, where the lions used to try to, come and bite us or whatever, or where the lions were a threat, since we know the lions already live there, let's create something to get in the way so that when we see the lions again, we can actually beat them. That's when we begin to push the brain forward to begin to evolve so that we can begin to come up with mechanisms to help us survive. And if you look at the brain, like, the kind of basic function of how they explain the brain, you have the reptilian brain, or like the I believe it's the limbic brain, or I believe it's called the reptilian brain. Essentially, it's like the little brain that everyone has, like that all animals have. It's this little brain down here. It's all about fight or flight, survival. It's the survival portion of the brain. And it's the part of the brain that existed with us from the beginning of time. And it's the part of the brain that we all have, all animals. Everyone knows to fight or flight. Everyone knows to survive. Okay. Then we developed the mammalian brain, which began to develop at certain parts of the brain, which was more about group orientation. So we begin to work in packs to help us survive. We begin to understand communication, things like teamwork. All these things were just a product of survival. Okay, because if we work as a team, that means we all can survive against these other threats, right? Even animals move in packs. Animals have the mammalian brain as well. But then things like the intuition, we developed, through time of pushing the mind forward, we developed the neocortex. Okay, the neofrontal cortex. We'll just say it's over here, right? It's part of the brain right here. And I'm gonna have to, because this is gonna start looking too crazy on my board, okay, because that looks kind of weird. But you get the idea. This top part of the brain. That's funny. This top part of the brain is what we developed. And this is where intuition came into the game. Okay? Intuition came into the game because we started realizing patterns, connections. And what's the big deal about patterns and connections? We begin to have simulations. And in these simulations that we create, our simulations are only based on what we've seen in the sensory world. Okay? So simulations that we make up, intuitive connections, all of these things that the intuition is utilizing comes from the sensory world, okay? It just takes these sensory objects, and in the mind, it can create its own ideas, all right? As an intuitive in general, you can imagine, like most intuitives that I know, have so many ideas spinning around in their mind. It's a lot of thoughts. It's a lot of things that are swirling around. And as an intuitive, sometimes it can be hard to ground yourself because you, instead of looking at the things around you with your senses, you're busy paying attention to these symbols in your mind. And it's almost like they're floating around. And one thing that I wanted to explain when I brought up that sensing is more so based on what's going on in time, like when I brought up the beach example, all the senses are at the beach hanging out. Well, intuition is a function of the mind that exists outside of time. It's very interesting. So your sensory body exists within time. It has to go to work. Like where your body goes, you go. That's the sensory environment. So they're in time and space, but they're paying attention to time and space very keenly, in their own way, right? Well, intuition is existing outside of time and space because, like I explained, while intuitives are talking about ideas, they're not here in the moment. They're talking about what happened last week, or they're talking about what about this idea, or what about if we did this, or did you see that? What do you think about that? All of these things exist in what I'll say is they exist in a state of no time. Okay. So with intuitives, like extroverted intuitives, like some of the people in the ENFP group watching, as an ENFP or as an intuitive, especially as an extroverted intuitive, you a lot of the time get to places late. A lot of the time you're not on time. A lot of the time it is a little bit of a scramble. And let's be honest, if you know the personality types, if any of you know ENTPs, I just pray, Lord have mercy on them. Wish you all the best as ENTPs, because for ENTP to have a certain level of discipline, Lord have mercy, they have to be a special person because they have so many ideas, but since they don't have the feeling to kind of ground them, they're more so depending on introverted thinking, which is their thoughts. So for like an ENTP, they essentially have all of this intuition and it's connected to their thoughts. So they can go forever because they might not even care how they feel. Like, I feel like I'm whatever, I'm still in my head. So ENTPs always make up that kind of archetype of the crazy scientist with the lab coat. That's kind of the idea of the ENTP. And I only say that's basically the idea of someone who has any extroverted intuition as their first or second function. It's a very ungrounded function because you're not where you are. You're not just in space and time. You're in many different places. Shout out the ENTP right here. Live. In terms of extrovert intuition, it is a function that is almost like it's almost like a tornado. And the power that one has to control that intuition is the power that they have to control the tornado. Because extrovert intuition is a bunch of ideas floating around, okay? So now that I've explained, intuition and sensing in general, let's see how this connects, man. Okay, because this is what changed the game for me when I was studying MBTI. Okay, it's all nice to know the different functions, the 16 personality types, all that cool stuff. But how can you understand how these functions actually work? How do they actually work? Well, let's look. I don't know if they can see here. If you have extrovert intuition, by default, you have introverted sensing. Okay, if you have introverted sensing, you automatically have extroverted intuition. So understand that connection in your stack. Just like I did with the thinking versus feeling, how the TE connects with FI and how TI connects with FE. To make it easier, how I think of it, the introverted function is the feminine principle. It's like you can call it the feminine principle. NE or the extroverted is the male principle, and they work together. So if you have introverted sensing, you must have extroverted intuition. And they work like this. You're looking at the past events that happened in life, and you're using those events to judge what will happen in the future. And then it's a cycle, okay? And it cycles back. Okay, this happened again. Okay, I remember that happened, so this must be what happens in the future. And okay, we're going to do this and plan this because this is what I saw happen back then. And oh yeah, I remember this situation that happened, so maybe we can try it this way in the future. And then, oh yeah, but I don't know about that. Maybe I need to change how that is. So I'm going to go back and write out a list so that I can remember to do X. So it's a cycle. So you can only have an idea of what will happen in the future, right? If you use the past as a metric. It kind of goes back to the idea, okay, that nothing's new under the sun. It goes back to the idea that everything works in cycles. It goes back to the idea that what has happened before will happen again, okay? So when you begin to understand that, you'll begin to realize that when we think of people that collect data, the reason why we're able to have an ability to judge what's going to happen in this world, we have weather forecasters, we have people who are like statisticians, and we have people who can gauge exactly what someone's going to do. Like the power of data, the power of science is a product of introverted sensing. Because when you collect enough data from the past, right, when you can mark enough things that have happened in present time and keep them organized in the past, guess what? You have a very good indicator of what will happen in the future. And if you understand extrovert intuition, you will know that's what it's all about, the future. Now, introverted sensing is about the past. Extrovert intuition is about the future, like the very far future. So if you ever want to have an idea of what is happening or what to, expect that is going to happen in the future, right? A lot of people base it on what's going on now. Like if you're an extroverted sensor, you're going to base it on what you see now. But I do want to emphasize, begin to bend your perspectives. If you're an introverted sensor who bases everything off the past, begin to realize maybe you can put some trust into certain ideas if you just make sure to look at what these ideas are based on. What's the data from the past? That's actually what introverted sensors do. They're all about facts and data. When you think about ISTJ, ISTJs are known for being your lawmakers, the ones that are all about facts. I need data. I need proof. They don't like to take risks as much. If you're introverted sensing dominant, you are not this whole risk taker, okay? Because that goes against everything. You want to know what's safe. You want to know what you can trust, and you want to know what's proven. Boom. Extroverted intuition. Welcome to my world, baby. It's all about chances. It's all about what might be. It's all about what's possible. All the possibilities, they live over here in this extroverted intuition world, all right? So now let's shift, okay? Because this is for the people who are ENFPs, ENTPs, ISTJs, INTJs, or not INTJs, I'm sorry, ISTJs, ISFJs, ESFJs, and what else? ENTPs, ENFPs, INFPs, all of these people, right, INTPs, okay, and ENTPs, I already said, they're all living in this world. Well, this is what happened in the past, so this was going to happen. Oh, this is what may happen in the future. Why is this happening? Well, it must be because of that. It's just back and forth. But by doing that, we begin to push the boundaries of reality forward. Because if you can gather enough data and symbols from the past, this is how we create a special future. So shout out to any dominance out there because you're pushing the culture forward. Shout out to the SI people because they're keeping the culture grounded, okay, from giving it some form of organization. Now, of course, me as any dominant type, these two also don't like each other because these introverted senses here have all of these rules that they made up to keep control of everything that totally pisses us any people off because they kind of shut down our ideas because when we try to do a bunch of our ideas and we're not grounded, we end up getting reprimanded by the SI and by the rules. If we don't keep track of enough things, SI systems that they created are going to freaking run us over, okay? But for NE types, we have so much ideas and innovation. For SI types, it can be very uncomfortable, and but we help push SIs forward, okay, to get with the program. That the world is still moving. So we need each other. We don't like each other, but we're connected to each other. That's how it is, you know. NE is my first function. SI is my last function. The power that I've had to develop in life, and the power that I would tell any dominant type is to work with SI. Work with SI. For me to tell you to work with extroverted sensing is unreasonable because to expect an extroverted intuition person to be so engaged in the present moment is literally telling them to deny a huge part of their identity. We're not so focused on the moment. We're more so focused on the moments and how they may be next. It's more so forward moving, like kind of function. So in order to ground that NE, that extroverted intuition, you want to work with introverted sensing. Things like writing down what you got to do the next day. Things like always keeping notes of valuable information. Like me, when I get a powerful thing that stuck out to me, a life-changing type of thing, I always write it down. I'm like a note taker to the max because my NE always wants to go back to those facts and it helps build it and strengthen it in my mind, okay? So that's one thing you can definitely do as any user, as an intuitive person, extrovert intuition. You want to keep track of everything. You're writing it down, keeping it in your notes, in your phone, things like that. As an introverted sensor, if you don't want to get too stuck and not grounded enough, so my note-taking method, essentially, what I do is I use my phone note file. And if you have an iPhone, you could just use Notes. It's like an app on there. If you have any of the droids, I believe they have a thing on there called Notes as well. I think it might have a different name, but wherever you can take notes and it saves it automatically. Also, you can use Google Drive, things like that. I basically write down like a main heading that like stuck out to me for the purpose of what I'm doing so that when I look at all the notes, I can have like a header. And then I write down the jewels. I'm all about like jewels, like things that matter, that like stick out. Because if you record everything, you'll just have so many notes, you won't even remember them. So, or you won't even be able to get around back to them. So keep note of all the gems that pop up in your mind or things that you've read, things that you've seen, or things you have to do, which is even more important a lot of the time, or equally important. Things you have to do, write them all down in your notes. And that is very helpful for extroverted intuitive, big time. Because your NE, it is very good at it keeps ideas in your mind like a bank. Like they don't really go too far away. They don't just leave. They leave for a period of time and then they cycle back. So the problem is, as an NE dominant, when they cycle back, you're out of the right timeline. Like you're not at the right timeline. So you're like, oh, I forgot, or that was 10 minutes ago, or oh man. So what you want to do is keep notes so that when you get those little flickers of, oh yeah, I got to do that, I got to do that, you could check the notes, keep everything kind of organized like that. And I also recommend Google Calendar if you can. So definitely do that. I do productivity coaching for people, and I basically help them set up their whole schedule. And it's amazing how powerful Google Calendar is. So definitely utilize that. So that kind of touches on SI and NE and the loop that's going on there, because I want to kind of touch on everything quickly. I know everybody has things to do, but I do want to touch on now SE and NI, and this is very fun because SE and NI. Okay, this is what I want you to know. This is introverted intuition. This is extroverted sensing, if everyone can see it. You got to be rid of it. And if you see now, imagine being an extroverted sensor or introverted intuitive world. It's a very different world now. The extroverted sensor is seeing everything in present time. Okay, everything in present time. It's so present. It's not even. It's kind of not even paying attention. It's naturally. If you imagine extroverted sensing, imagine if you shut off your intuition for a second and just looked at whatever's around you. Like just look at, just like if there's anything in your environment, just look at it and really look at it. Maybe just look at the color, the patterns in it, how bright it is. Like I was looking at this. What is this? A total home. It's like a cleaning, whatever. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at a water bottle. Like, but really look at the water. Like this is water. I was looking at a cleaning product. This is what I was looking at, people, so you can be in my world for a second. Look at how bright this is. Like I'm just looking at it. Boom. It's such a different world for me because to shut that intuition off, it's almost like, ugh, now I want to think again. But if we just look at it like that, imagine if you shut the brain off in our present. Think about how much more energy and space you have to just do whatever you're going to do now. If you cut all the ideas off, shut them off, you're just here with you and all of your present energy. That's sensory. That's especially extroverted sensing. Because introverted sensors still have that extroverted intuition. So if you really want to deal with the presentness of sensing, that's extroverted sensing. And that's why if you look at introverted intuitives, they kind of have this kind of extroverted sensing thing as well. Okay. Now, how does their intuition work with this? And by the way, if you have introverted intuition, here's how it works. It works like this. This is what I'm seeing right now. Okay. I'm looking at everything in the room, blah, blah, blah. Then NI, what NI does is it says, boom, something stands out. And then it goes into that. So introverted intuition is the mechanism that notices the random things in the environment or what doesn't fit or what is unique. It's paying attention to, in this environment, what is unique, what doesn't fit, what is standing out, like what's unnormal. And that's what it's putting its intuition on. It's forward thinking. So it's like NI people will notice something in the environment that it doesn't fit, and NI will work to correct that. So while the sensor is hanging out talking at the beach, like I brought up the beach example, we're all hanging out at the beach. While the sensors are hanging out, let's say the sensors are over here riding motorboats and stuff, because they're just all engaged in experience. You know, not to say that they're just not doing anything, but that's awesome. If you're engaged in experience, it's beautiful. Like that's the present function we all need. We all should be present at times. Well, guess what? The extroverted intuitives will be focused on the nuances in the environment. So because they're so focused on the patterns and they're more focused on what's connecting in the present environment, just like the extroverted and intuitive, they can't be on a motorboat because they're not really focused on necessarily experiencing the motorboat, even though they'd love to do that. Really, after they did it, they'll be like, oh, that was so awesome. I was on a motorboat. You know, but NI is kind of nervous. Like if NI has too much sensory stuff, introverted intuitives can get kind of like nervous. So unless you have NI and SE in your second and third stack, where like, okay, you're kind of in both worlds. If you lead with introverted intuition, like INTJs, INFJs, they're much more delicate with the sensory environment because the sensory environment has so much going on. They more so want to pay attention to a nuance or a specific aspect of the sensory environment and then delve into that. So that is very intuitive as well, because while they're paying attention to a specific symbol, NI is all about symbols. I want you to look at it like this. Extroverted intuition is a bunch of symbols. And it's connecting a bunch of different symbols together, right? It can be anything. So like I said, Lido is a guy I know that's good at making pizza. Maybe we should create a pizza shop so that people can try Lido's pizza. So NE is connecting all of this. And I, on the other hand, would be more focused on, oh wow, maybe we can make a logo. Like NI is about what in the present environment can I push forward? SE is just present. I'm just in the present environment. And I is saying, okay, what in this environment can I utilize and push forward? Now, SI is like, I'm in the past. I'm just doing what I know is right. And E is saying, okay, based on what you've seen in the past, what can we do to push things forward? So you notice that both intuitive functions are forward oriented. The only difference is extroverted intuition is taking everything, like whether past, present, future, it's taking all of these ideas and always connecting them. NI is saying, okay, let me erase all of these extra ideas in my head and focus in on the one. Okay. And that one could be one in its present environment, right? Or it can be one ideal or one idea or one thing. One thing about NI dominant or introverted intuitive dominant types is that when they have their mind locked in on something, you can't stop them. Okay. Because not only do they have that one thing being the only thing as their attention, but that SE, that primal function, when they really get behind something, it kicks in. And so when you start seeing someone want to be wanting to push past obstacles, wanting to do the impossible. When you think of the Elon Musk, who is an INTJ, right? And he has this ability to create all of these amazing things. What's pushing him forward? It's one ideal. It's one idea that I want to push XYZ forward. So what gives introverted intuitives more power than extroverted intuitives at times is that introverted intuitives are less distracted. If you ever heard of a book called The One Thing, which is like my mom's favorite book, and she freaking used her, she's an INFJ who just super powered her way into making her own business and stuff. Like, I'm like, okay, like, you know, she just like locked in, and to this day she's locked in. But I noticed that with all introverted intuitive dominants, like they lock in and they pull from everything in the moment to drive that one idea. So that's introverted intuition. Think of it as they're connecting things, but they're connecting things in the present moment. And while that intuitive, or while that introverted intuitive is connecting this in the present moment and locked in, that's why a lot of time they're really good at things like jobs, working in certain environments. They are considered the masterminds, or that's considered the mastermind function, because it's so present in the environment. It has the wherewithal to deliver in the present. Whereas it's harder for the extroverted intuitive, because the extroverted intuitive has to balance out more energy because it's dealing with more ideas. So NE types are more valuable, we'd say, in when it comes to overall or collectively pushing something forward or gathering a bunch of data, because what you'll learn is the one power that NE has that NI doesn't have is that I've noticed NI can get focused on one idea too much, and they can end up missing the whole picture. The same way an extroverted sensor can get caught up in the present moment so much, he forgot about the rules that were going on in the past that people put together. Or he forgot about how other people might feel based on things that happened before. So because he's so present, he can get into some trouble. Well, guess what? Because NI is so present, NI can miss a bunch of information, okay, that the NE can pick up on because NE's focused on everything. But when we talk about the ability to take actions and the ability to take advantage of the present moment, this is what you want to tap into. Whether you're extroverted, intuitive, whatever, any of these, just know you have the ability to tap into all these functions. Okay. Like you can't do them perfectly, but I've watched videos that said like your fourth function is like a baby, like a 3-year-old, and your second function is like an 8-year-old, and your third function is like an 8-year-old, and your second function is like a 18-year-old, and then your first function is like an adult or whatever. I'm like, look, man, I mean, I think that has some credits, but the whole goal of what we're doing is we're trying to push the mind forward and push the psychology forward, because for example, I'm an ENFP, and extroverted thinking is my third function. And, you know, I always had to think about that. Like, okay, I feel like I'm pretty logical, but I don't want to be this just straight up feeler. That's just, oh, you're just an intuitive feeler who's just all about your head's in the clouds and it's nothing but fairies and pixie dust and elephants that fly, all this shit. I'm like, hold on, I'm not like that. Okay. As much as I am an ENFP, I do have a lot of logic, and I do know some extremely intelligent ENFPs that are very analytical and rational. So how do you balance that out? Well, you have to utilize that third function. You have to put work into building that, because I just said, look, man, I got to put all my energy into my extroverted thinking, which is my third function, so that I can ground this intuition with some like facts. So now I'm not just speaking from my ideas or from that NE that's just talking about, oh, what about this? What if this? Now, if you gather enough facts and you utilize that extroverted thinking and you gather enough data and enough knowledge, you know, that your introverted sensing can recycle all the time so that it sticks in your mind, guess what? You become an extroverted intuitive that's laced with some serious knowledge and like that's laced with some facts. So now when they try to call you a freaking fairy or whatever, like your head's in the clouds because you're intuitive and you're a feeler. Guess what? This intuitive feeler has a lot of factual logic. So when you talk to me, you better put some respect on it. Boom. So that's what I want all of the intuitives to kind of utilize. And anybody, if you want, the first thing I'd say for anybody that wants to develop their functions, right? Because your first two functions is basically what runs the show for everybody. If you're ISTJ, it's that thinking and that sensing that's running you. You probably have not that good with feelings, and you're probably not that good when it comes to of course, judging, perceiving, that's kind of different. So, like I said, the way it's named out with Myers-Briggs is ENFP, perceiver, ENFJ, judger, like that PJ. But the PJ really doesn't exist. What exists is this. They just say it like that to make it simple. Once you understand this mechanism, how NE works for SI, SE works for NI, how TE works with TI, how TE works with FI, and how extroverted feeling works with introverted thinking. Once you understand this dynamic, you have your fingers and your hands on a very special understanding, because now you really know how the cognitive functions work. But that's really the key to understand that. And so to kind of finish out everything and to kind of bring it all together, right? Because I basically explained sensing versus intuition on a basic level. We've understood how these two work together, introverted sensing and NE. Understood how extroverted sensing works with introverted intuition. Now we have to say, how do you integrate all of these functions? Okay. How do you integrate them all so that you can maximize on your experience in life? Okay. And so here's what it is. When you find yourself with too many ideas because of extroverted intuition, what you want to do is you want to try to strengthen NI through the power of focusing on one idea, eliminating the other ideas. Okay, all these ideas aren't needed all the time. So that's where you practice grounding techniques, or better yet, focus on a purpose, right? What's the purpose of everything that I'm doing? So that all these any ideas can begin to work for you around one purpose. Okay. And then we talk about extroverted sensing. How can an extroverted sensor who's in the present moment begin to take into account more than the present, right? Well, I'm not going to tell an extroverted sensor to become an introverted sensor, or to become an extrovert intuitive, because that's not in their lane, but it can utilize more NI, which is what are the things in the environment that are standing out, and begin to try to see how they connect. The more you develop that, the more you try practicing to see how things connect externally, is how you'll be able to improve that extroverted sensing. Because here's the power of it. Extroverted sensing is having all these present experiences. Well, guess what? The more that you're able to make proper connections, the more that you're able to pay attention to the things that are in the environment that are connecting. You might not make the best connections, but just by doing it, it puts you in a position where you can have even better experiences now. So it's not for no reason. Like extroverted sensors, when you start talking about a lot of ideas, they start being like, I just want to, all right, I'll talk to you later. Like, there's a lot of ideas. I'll think about them later. So, but what if you tell the extroverted sensor, guess what? If you actually take the time to go into these ideas and notice these connections, you'll be able to have better experiences. So if you really want to have fun experiences as a user, begin to pay attention to connections. Begin to put some value into what happened in the past so that you can make proper changes, okay? Rather than bulldozing, okay? And for the NEs as well, or the SIs, right? Utilize extroverted sensing in times like, if you want to build that strength, things like meditation, mindfulness, present, relaxing. Practice not having to think all day. Practice being able to zone in a little bit more in your environment, okay? And there's some tools and activities that you can do to do that, okay, that I'll share. One of those being, instead of looking at things in your environment, like when you're driving by and you're saying, and you might notice a Home Depot, right? You might see, oh, that's a Home Depot. I want you to relate the Home Depot to yourself. What I mean by that is be like, there's a Home Depot. That means that I'm home and I'm deep relaxing. I feel deeply relaxed at home. So now you took that symbol and you found a way to relate it to your present experience. Or you might see something that says Deer Park. What you might say is, man, I feel like a deer drinking water by the fountains, relaxing, and there's nobody else around me. Or you might see something that says 7 Up, and you'll be like, man, I feel like I'm up. I feel like I'm up, and I'm like, if I have $7 million and I'm up. That does take a little bit of intuitive work, but if you're a sensor, you have intuition, and this can help intuitives as well to to help focus that intuition. So you're all over the place, but you see a 7 Up. Okay, seven. I feel up. Okay, I feel up, and seven's my lucky number. Whatever. Take things and relate them to you. That's how you can begin to take life and integrate these external things into your experience. It helps bring you back into the present, right? Or if you're so present all the time, it helps take you out of the present and make connections. So that's a technique you can definitely utilize. And these last ones right here, introverted sensing. Okay, how do we build introverted sensing? Essentially, begin to pay attention to data, begin to keep notes, keep track of things. Okay. And if you want to build SI, that's how you essentially do it. Begin to value data, begin to um, pay attention to data, pay attention to things that happened in the past. Why? Because whatever happened in the past is going to happen in the future again. Or whatever's happened in the past can happen again. So while there are a lot of SE types and NI types that don't care about the past, right? Especially introverted intuitives. Introverted sensing is so low for them. I think it's their last function. If you're introverted intuitive, introverted sensing is your last function. Well, understand that the past has a lot of value in it because it's going to come back around again. So don't ignore these events, ignore things like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. The next thing you've basically missed out on so much data and you've done so much that you don't even realize the effects you created. And now you don't have no friends, nobody likes you because you're just bulldozing through life focused on one thing. That is beautiful to focus on one thing. But if you want to attain balance, you want to pay attention to what else is going on. I do have this one vision, but you might want to look and see, how does this vision relate? Like, how did people in the past that had this vision, how did things work for them? How did things develop for them? Or people who also focused on one vision or focused on what I'm focused on. What are some things they did? What are some things they tried? This is all SI. Okay, it's utilizing the past to maximize on the future. Okay, and last but not least, if you want to build introverted intuition, okay, what you want to do is pay attention to the nuances in the environment. So you may want to be present, and you may want to focus on one thing. Okay, practice focusing on one thing. Practice on noticing what's peculiar. Practice on noticing what looks irregular, what needs to be moved around in the environment. Okay, what doesn't fit, what does fit, what can make things better in the environment, right? That's introverted intuition. It locks in on a symbol, right? And it builds that symbol up. Okay, extroverted intuition takes a bunch of symbols hanging around and it connects them all. Okay, introverted sensing pays attention to a bunch of past data and it connects the past data and it uses that past data to make present decisions. Okay, and extroverted sensing is a present experiential function looking to connect and integrate itself with the present moment. Okay, through touching, tasting, feeling, hearing, seeing. By engaging with the environment, it picks up information that allows it to know what to do next. Okay. So that is my spiel on sensing versus intuition. If anybody has any questions, let me know. All right. And also, I'm going to begin to go into some fun stuff. Like I'm about to begin to just talk about the types, things you can know about the types, X, Y, Z. If you want me to go into any subjects in regard to MBTI, let me know. This is kind of like the intro sessions into MBTI magic. Eventually, we're going to start going into how to utilize the functions so that you can begin to create a magical experience for yourself in life. Because one thing I'll tell you is a lot of people are only living or utilizing only 2 of their functions, and maybe 3 if they're advanced or if they're trying to evolve. But there's 16 functions. So essentially, that's the equivalent of using like only 18%. Like people say you only use 10% of the brain. Well, if we look at the functions and you're only using your 2 dominant functions mainly, you are only using 10% of your brain. Damn near. Okay, maybe even less. That's less than 10%. So we want to begin to integrate the brain, you to play with these other functions, even for a little bit. It doesn't, of course, you're not going to all of a sudden go from extroverted sensor into extroverted intuitive. That's not realistic. Right? But Maybe as extroverted sensor, you can practice one day trying to make connections. It can be anything, making music, writing poetry. Now you're tapping into that intuitive world as a sensor. And as an intuitive, if you want to be like, of course, you're not going to become an extroverted sensor, period. Like, that's not your cognitive stack. Okay. But what you can do is be super present for like 5 minutes and be like, let me just observe everything in my room and just be with myself in this moment for just 5 minutes. Put a timer on, and for 5 minutes, be very present. Or if you don't want to make it that deep, just go play sports, go play basketball or anything. Because once you're playing sports, you have no choice but to use extroverted sensing. When you're engaged in sports and physical activities, or if you're doing weights and things like that, especially team sports, do something where you have to be alert, or else people are gonna be mad at you because you don't have time to be super intuitive all day on a court when you're playing. You have teammates, or in football, because if you're thinking in your head, you're gonna get cracked, like boom. So begin to engage in sports, play around, and as an intuitive, you'll see that sensory world, or that sensory come out of you, because while you're playing basketball or whatever, you're just in the moment, getting the pass, getting the rebound. That's the experience of extroverted sensing. It's moment to moment. It's taking life as it comes, rather than going outside of time and space and going into some place in your mind that exists in no time. Like I told you, like just thinking about whatever. Okay. So that's my spiel on sensing versus intuition. Make sure you integrate the types, and make sure you watch this, because I'm going to post the recording tomorrow on the MBTI pages. All right. And also just on my YouTube. So close it out. Check me out at God Johnny Speaks on YouTube, GODJANI SPEAKS on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram at God_JANI, God Johnny. You can follow me on Facebook at my God Johnny Facebook page, or you can just follow me at a Johnny Irish on my Facebook page, which is already on there. You've probably seen it. And last but not least, you can visit my website, godjohnny.com, for any one-on-ones when it comes to MBTI. If you want to get any readings, like if you want to know your personality type, if you want to know other personality types, if you want to know how to integrate your functions, I'm all about MBTI and like pushing to the next level. I'm telling you, MBTI is extremely special. And the more that you begin to look into it and learn about it, you're going to be in a different world than the people around you, because you're going to be so connected. And you're going to have so much awareness. So with that being said, thank you for watching. All right. And I'll be back next Tuesday with more than MBTI magic. All right. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you all soon. All right. Peace.